I love anime. It's such a beautiful canvas for action, adventure, storytelling, and heartache. And when we love something, we want the absolute best for it. We want it to succeed at whatever it does. If we love our mate, parents, kids, or friends, we want them to be happy and succeed in their work and hobbies. But that doesn't mean we don't see their flaws. Nobody's perfect, and most of the time we just choose to overlook minor stuff. But if they have a flaw big enough where it could easily ruin all the amazing qualities they have, or all the hard work they put into success, then the loving thing to do is respectfully call them out on it. I love anime, but lately there's a major flaw that's reared its ugly head, and if it's not dealt with, it could ruin all the amazing things anime brings us, and it needs to be talked about. Let the rambling begin. Master Roshi, aka the king of perverted, degenerate behavior, the same man whose price to be accepted as his pupil was to bring him adult literature, was always met with justifiable violence whenever he tried any of his shenanigans. And even though from a martial arts standpoint he was one of the most skilled and powerful people on Earth, as a person he was almost universally viewed with some level of contempt for his pervy ways. His antics were played for comedy, and you could argue that even that was in poor taste. But ultimately his actions were displayed as negative and shameful, and something to be looked down on. He was a perfect walking, talking example of how to not treat women. That's a pretty common trope in anime since the 90s of having a typically older character being a perv with wandering hands. It's cringy, but they're also always shown as being despicable and shameful, often getting beaten for their creepy conduct. It's never praised or shown as acceptable, and it's definitely not displayed as something desirable or worth chasing. And that shouldn't be shocking, because that's how real life is. We actually have a term for that, sexual harassment, and it's not really a joke, unless you're a politician or Hollywood elite. If you saw someone you know pull some Master Roshi level stuff, you probably wouldn't be their friend much longer, hopefully. If you saw some full-grown adult with a kid who ain't theirs on their lap and cuddling with them, you'd call the authorities. If you saw someone trying to take advantage of someone who's unconscious, you do everything to get them away from that person regardless of their reason. Well, some of the most popular and highly reviewed anime of our generation are doing these exact things, but with a twist. See, it isn't the shameful antagonist doing these things, it's the protagonist. And it's not shown as really being all that shameful or even wrong, as long as you don't get caught and choose to rationalize it through a certain perspective. It's becoming normalized, and we're slowly being desensitized. They're also filled to the brim with completely unrealistic and unnecessary fan service, to the point where it's basically a nerd's softcore fantasy. We should be insulted by this kind of content, not just because it's lewd, but because writers and studios think we as the audience don't have the capacity or desire to watch a show based purely on its story, action, animation, music, characters, etc., unless they shove this kind of stuff in our face constantly. There are tons of examples I could use, but since my editor will rage quit if I make this over 10 minutes, and most of us can't keep our attention for more than a few minutes, let's focus on just a few. Let's talk about one of the most popular and praised anime in recent years, Jobless Reincarnation. This show currently has 8.4 out of 10 on IMDb and My Anime List, with the latter having over 726,000 reviews. So it's gotta be amazing, right? That's what most anime reviewers would have you believe. And while the animation is absolutely gorgeous to look at, it appears to be a traditional isekai. The protagonist is a 30-year-old incel basement dweller who probably only surfaces for more chips and Kleenex, until Truck-kun sends him to another world. The twist is that he's literally reborn as he comes back in the form of a newborn infant. This is an interesting and unique spin on the tired isekai genre, and could lead to some really fun arcs of him getting to experience growing up in a loving, supportive family, and learning how to use a second chance at life to its maximum. But that's not exactly what this show has in mind. The first thing he does is go nuts over the idea of nursing off his new mother. He enjoys listening to the sounds of his parents' WWE matches, and the show even portrays his 12-year-old looking mentor. Don't worry guys, she's actually super old, but just ages slowly so it's totally legal and not weird at all, according to the writers, who sits outside his parents' room as they're getting it on, and she's clearly, she's enjoying it nearly as much as they are. Let's just leave it at that. Later, the protagonist is shown stealing underwear from various female characters, including the 12-year-old girl. Remember, he's really in his 30s. And that's all just in the first episode. It gets much worse from there. I can't speak to how every episode is, as I didn't keep watching, and that's not really the point. For a show that has that many red flags in just the first episode, you'd think most normal, emotionally mature, and healthy people would stop watching there and write it off. After all, the show plays off all his disgusting, perverted, pedo-grooming Epstein actions as funny and not really a big deal. And the surrounding characters allow him to get away with it because they believe it's a little kid acting out or being innocent, not realizing it's a 30-year-old something predator. They try to justify it as room for growth in his character, but there aren't any consequences, and the audience walks away being taught that this is acceptable and normal. But it's not normal or acceptable, and it's definitely not healthy for humans to think like this. And yet over 700,000 people absolutely loved it so much they wrote a review praising it. That's symptomatic of a deeper issue. If you were to live stream the first episode of this show just 20 years ago, in 2003, the same year that gave us Full Metal Alchemist, Cromartie High School, and Wolf's Rain, the vast majority of people would instantly label it as degenerate, and would call it out on the overt grooming pervy themes heavily laced throughout. They'd denounce the main character, and the writers would likely have trouble finding work after. But today, it's praised as a masterpiece, with millions clamoring for the next season to arrive. Don't get me wrong, the ecchi genre has existed for years, but it's always been cast to the outskirts of the anime world as it rightfully deserves. But the lines between the genres are being blurred, and that's concerning. Over 30% of anime viewers are under the age of 18, so these are people that are still in those formative years and learning the emotional and social skills that they will use in their adult lives. When we're growing up, our parents and mentors instill in us the core values that help us become respectable men and women. Things like, it's okay to treat women as sex objects. That you don't need to consent if it's a guy. It's completely acceptable to groom a child. Or that you can be an utter pervy degenerate as long as you can make people laugh about it. Right? In Goblin Slayer, the protagonist is mortally wounded, and in a last-ditch effort to save him, the priestess performs a ritual that is supposed to miraculously heal them both, but only works if the person sleeps with a virgin. That alone doesn't leave much to the imagination, and though the show tries to say nothing happened, the characters wake up butt naked, and the following conversation makes it fairly clear it wasn't just sleeping going on. The MC was unconscious, remember, so there's some pretty obvious issues with consent that the show doesn't even address. I mean, imagine if the roles were reversed and the unconscious person was a woman. You'd probably feel some kind of way about that scene, right? How about Roswaal and Ram from ReZero? When we first see this scene of Ram sitting on Roswaal's lap, it clearly doesn't look platonic. I'm sure it's complicated, especially with her Stockholm Syndrome going on, but she's clearly got some romantic feelings for him. That's not her fault, but how about the fact that Roswaal is currently hundreds of years old, inhabiting the body of a 30-year-old, with a 17-year-old vulnerable girl that he knows has feelings towards him sitting on his lap? That's really creepy for so many reasons. Even shows like Shield Hero or My Hero Academia aren't entirely immune to these trends. Mineta is a stereotypical pervy character who has no lasting or impactful consequences despite showing no real remorse. Raphtalia is clearly the romance option for the MC, and they're universally shipped. But the fact is, she's only 10 years old. And the show just used the whole, well, she actually ages and matures way faster than a human, so in just a few months, she's essentially legal. And we just ate it up. And if that's how they want to write their world, so be it. But it's telling when we start to see a common theme throughout these shows. It's become increasingly popular to have lolis in nearly every show. If you're not familiar with that term, I hope your pillow always stays cool, your bank account full, and your dad's allergic to milk. It refers to a character that looks like a cute, very young girl, typically dressed up in fancy dresses to make them look even younger. The twist is that they're usually much older than they appear, often hundreds or even thousands of years old, and are somehow cursed to just eternally look like a young child. But the shows also make a point to portray that this character often has romantic feelings, typically towards the MC. They're validating the idea of an adult romancing someone that, at the end of the day, looks like a child. I hate politics and I refuse to ever get involved with such corrupt and pointless things, but I've noticed a correlation between the things we're discussing today and what certain people are wanting to become legal and normalized in our society. I don't think either is a coincidence. We see teachers constantly in the news for playing hide the magic marker and more elites being outed as predators. The winds of our society are shifting, and while not inherently all bad, it's concerning what we're allowing ourselves to passively accept when it comes to things like this. Look, I'm not saying to boycott every single anime that has fan service. At the end of the day, these studios and shows are killing it. They're popular because, in general, the masses love and support it. We only have ourselves to blame for this epidemic. Without that support, the industry would abandon the idea that every show needs to be filled with this stuff. Money talks, and the second those views and money dry up because people decide they don't want to drink the Cosby Kool-Aid, you'll see a shift in the amount of this content being injected into shows. If you want proof that none of this is necessary, just look at some of the best anime of all time. Shows like Cowboy Bebop, Full Metal Alchemist, Jujutsu Kaisen, Attack on Titan, Wonder Egg Priority, Tower of God, Toradora, or Haikyuu all have amazing stories, cool and complex characters, beautiful art and music, all with little to no fan service. In fact, if you want to see this point taken to its logical conclusion, look no further than Polar Bear Cafe. It's a show about a lazy panda that doesn't want to do anything beyond sleep and eat. He's forced to get a job, even though he has zero skills, experience, or work ethic, and the antics continue from there. There is literally zero fan service. It's super funny, wholesome, and great for binging in the background. It's kind of like if Zootopia met The Office. But regardless of what you choose to watch in the privacy of your mom's basement, I'm not judging you. If you want to have a giant rim body pillow and cover your Honda Civic in cringe anime waifus, I'm not judging you. Just know that there's a reason the average person gets visibly uncomfortable when we mention we watch anime. And maybe give some thought as to what you're watching on your screen, because it absolutely has an effect on your mind. That's all. Like I said, I love anime, and not everyone has to like the same shows or genres I do. We're all different people. Some people really love shonens. Some people really love rom-coms. Some people really love One Piece. At the end of the day, I just hope in the future we get to continue to be spoiled with amazing anime. Anyways, that's all I've got to say about that. If you've got a hot take or suggestion of an anime you think is underrated, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. And as always, take care and have a great day, you beautiful beasts.